It's day 2 of the third test in Grenada, and this is Ask George. George, our first question today comes from Simon, who's saying, this isn't a great pitch, but isn't it a thrilling test match?
Yeah, that's spot on. Yeah, it really is. Really good fun couple of days. Slow scoring, I know, but it's been gripping. The reason that I suspect he says it's not a good pitch is because it doesn't entirely reward merit. I think that you want, good play to be rewarded, and the fact is that so many wickets are falling to variable bounce, which I think is an element of chance, which we could probably do without. But and the series is going down to the wire, and after 2 games that were actually quite dull, if we're honest, the first 2 tests, it's just what the series needed.
We talked about variable bounce a little bit yesterday. Do you think it's been exaggerated even more today?
Actually, not as much as I thought it would be. It is extremely irregular. But whether England are hitting the wrong lengths, I don't know. It's obviously much more from one end, the Dobell end, is it? But it hasn't seemed to get a whole lot worse, and I think we were expecting it would, and the players still think it will. So the fact that West Indies have a little lead maybe isn't hugely relevant, because batting fourth might be the most difficult time to bat in the match. But we'll see. It's been a bit unpredictable, hasn't it? Which is part of the reason that it's so difficult. But it is very slow. And so you are seeing, Josh De Silva this evening was able to adapt a couple of times when he got a couple that kept very low.
Can you give us an idea of the atmospherics? I know it was very humid yesterday. Was it similar today?
Yeah, it was, yeah. It's pretty warm outside, yeah. It's baking in the sun. I think it got to 31. Maybe doesn't sound that hot, but I always think that we don't measure temperature in quite the way we should, because I guarantee 30 in Australia is nothing like 30 in London. 30 in London's horrendous, isn't it? So today, yeah, it was heavy. It was really quite hot in the sun. There was just occasionally you get a lick of wind, which is refreshing. You would have thought in English conditions, you would think the ball would swing, but it didn't really. And there were a couple of little rain showers to freshen it up, but they only last moments. So it's really, really hard work for bowlers.
So a petition to introduce degrees Dobell to come to figure out what the true...
Would you know what I mean? I think, honestly, 35 degrees in Perth feels quite refreshing, and 28 degrees on the tube is horrendous.
And on that scale, where was Grenada today?
Oh, it wasn't horrendous by any means. We are outside, but we're not in the sun. But the times that I ventured out in the sun, I gave the photographers some water, bless them. You do have, it reminds you of the respect you have to have for the players. Yeah, because they're incredibly fit. But I do think that both sides look really, really tired. And I think it's really unreasonable to ask them to play 3 back-to-back tests. I guess the problem was the window was for 2 tests, wasn't it? And they shoved another one in to reward West Indies for their help they gave to England in the summer of 2020, but there wasn't any more actual time. So we've just ended up with this very, very condensed tour.
While we're on that, I'm quite interested in your take on this, because a lot of conjecture on social media over the whole tour about fans being at the games, not a lot from West Indies, though in Grenada it seems that there are more locals than there were in Antigua and in Barbados. Is that a fair assessment from your bird's eye view? And if so,
not
why?
Entirely.
Okay.
Not entirely. Well, there's a lot of stuff in there to go through, but one of the things is that Caribbean people are used to the sun and they don't sit out in it in the same way that English supporters who are desperate for a bit of sun do. So there are always a few more than sometimes people suggest. And yeah, I think there probably have been a few more in Grenada as well, and they've come into the ground later in the day because tickets are priced in a way that overseas supporters pay more. The other thing is you have to remember that, as if you're going to forget, we've all been through the pandemic. There's been no furlough here. So an economy based very much on tourism has missed out on a lot of work, and people aren't particularly willing, when I speak to them, to take time off to go to the cricket. It's not so much the price of the ticket, it's the work you might lose. So that is understandable, I think. There are different issues in different places. Who in their right mind would sit through that Barbados nonsense unless they've been paid to? Yeah, and honestly, I don't know, I don't want to exaggerate, but at least a dozen people, England supporters, have said to me never again at Barbados. I mean, I love the place, it's probably my favourite place in the world, but I do think they dropped the ball. Antigua, the ground is quite a long way from the city, and for that reason is quite rarely full for test games, or nowhere near full. I've never seen it anywhere near full. And Grenada, you know, as I say, there was no furlough, so people have struggled financially, but actually as the day progresses, there's a decent atmosphere. There really is. There's quite a lot of authentic Caribbean cricket ground noise. There's quite a lot of support. Yeah, I mean, the fact, this narrative that people in the Caribbean are no longer interested in cricket is massively overplayed, and in my view, utterly false. You know, if you still went into bars or taxis or whatever, you'll find cricket on the TV or cricket on the radio. It's just, you know, the economic imperatives are a bit different. So I think that English people have this pent-up desire to go on holiday, watch cricket, see their friends. And people here have a pent-up desire to make some money and, make the most of the fact that they've invested in England coming here. It's a big deal. It is a big deal to this island.
Yeah, my personal experience, obviously I was in Antigua, as you know, well, I hope you remember because you came for dinner. So that was a lovely experience. Well, aside from that dinner, obviously, but we had
lovely dinner.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah. We had a great time, but I think that my experience from that was that speaking to any local beach bar or any restaurant that had relied on tourist trade was that they hadn't been open for 18 months to 2 years, and that they needed to be open for as long as they could for every single day of every single week. And maybe that is what you're saying here, is that people can't really spare the time to go to the cricket as much as they might have previously done. Because if we look back to the previous England trip in 2019, there were many more people in the grounds from both experience, having been there, and from seeing on TV as well.
No, that's exactly right. It's not the same at all. Look, just to put it in perspective, in Grenada in particular, people were encouraged to grow their own food, in particular during the pandemic, catch their own fish. You know, things have been really hard. As I say, the government have invested quite heavily in getting the England team here, and they have to make the most of it. So, you know, I wouldn't judge too much on the fact that the grounds aren't particularly fun. And also, you'll very rarely see Caribbean people sitting out in the sun because they're not insane.
Well, let's move on to another question. And Simon Best asks, why are England so bad at bowling at tail enders?
I don't know that they are that bad, but I mean, what do you particularly want when you're bowling to a tail ender? I mean, you probably want pace or spin.
No, that's what Michael Vaughan was going on about that on BT Sport today in the UK. Pace, a mystery spinner or express pace, he was banging on about. England have neither.
I don't know that it has to be mystery. Nathan Lyon doesn't have any mystery, does he? I mean, he's just good. You know, Graham Swan wasn't exactly mystery, but, you know, Graham Swan's very good. But there's a lot going on. Firstly, De Silva in particular, and Roach, who's been terrific with the Battle series, but De Silva's played brilliantly. I mean, he occupied the crease, he fought, he was dogged, and then when he got an opportunity, he went for it. So the ball definitely is easier to play when it's softer. The pitch has now been baked in the sun, so anything that was there in that first hour or two, the tackiness, that's gone. So, you know, there are a lot of things combining, but I mean, if I'm really honest, it's impossible to deny the poverty in the standard of English cricket right now. I'm sorry, it's just not very good. It's not very good. It wouldn't be, because we've ignored the breeding grounds, development grounds, for years, and that comes back to bite you on the arse. It's not like this is suddenly happening, you know, smoosh, well, we're suddenly not very good. This has been warned about for years. You know, if you don't allow a county system where spinners even get a chance to bowl very much, and the places they do, they only have to turn their arm over and it turns miles. If you ask your fast bowlers to bowl too much, or they're not really required because you can just... I mean, Ali Martin from The Guardian described it really well earlier. He said it's county cricket's fishing with dynamite. It's exactly right. You put the Duke's ball on a length, it nibbles around to get a wicket. Well, it doesn't work overseas in Test cricket. It just doesn't work. So, I think we've been in denial, or the people who run English cricket have been in denial for years, but England are ninth in the World Test Championship. That's bottom. For a country so well resourced, that should be really embarrassing and painful. It should be. It should be painful. And maybe you can make an argument. You can make an argument that defeat here might shock the right people into action. I don't think so, because they're completely in denial. But you'll need a change of regime. But I've been saying that for years, haven't
I? Yeah, years and years. It's almost like a Freudian slip to replace country with company there when you talk about the ECB and being a profit-making body, huh? Maybe you've trained yourself so much into saying that sort of thing that...
I wish I was clever enough to have done that on purpose. I wish I could take any credit.
Well, is there any sort of mitigation that we can talk about the fact that there are injuries currently to Wood, to Archer, to Stone, to raw pace, where we're down, or say where the English team is down to the fourth level of what they're trying to do in terms of an attack?
Yes, absolutely, categorically, of course there is. But, West Indies are without at least Shannon Gabriel. They're without people as well, aren't they? Shane Thomas, you might say. So there are always these caveats and stuff. Is it bad luck that they're without Jofra Archer? Well, I think he was overbowled. I think he was probably overbowled. Is it bad luck that they're without Ollie Robinson? Well, he doesn't seem terribly fit, does he? So how is it that he's been able to get to the England team, to that level, to go through all the Lions tours, to go through county cricket, and not really be fit enough to do it? We need to be honest about where we are. I think that's the first step in healing, is to have an honest diagnosis. We're not very good at cricket, particularly Test cricket.
On that optimistic note, shall we move on to the next question? Neil Manship. He's asking, win, lose or draw, are we any closer to assessing Joe Root's captaincy?
It's such a good question. So I'm going to tell you my honest feeling is that he's probably still the right man for the job. But if they lose this game and they've lost, that would be, if you include India, they've lost 5 series in a row, or certainly not won 5 series in a row. And they will have won 1 in 17.
Yeah.
So, if you put that case in cold figures, it's terribly hard to defend. I would just say that sacking Root would be very similar to sacking Chris Silverwood or Ashley Giles, which I didn't think was the right thing to do, because you're blaming individuals for a systemic error. I think the system is utterly screwed. And if you keep scapegoating individuals, I don't think you're looking at the real thing. Now, having said that, I think Ben Stokes could captain absolutely fine. He's fantastic. He reads the game well. He's already a huge leader in the side. But Joe Root feels to be like the natural leader, and I think we'd be blaming him for problems that are much deeper than, whether he should have had a third man or whatever. So, that's my honest answer. And I think, personally, we've seen some improvement from him. I've never thought he was an awful captain anyway, to be honest. I think there's a lot to like. But if you've ever played poker, if you have a rubbish hand, you fold. In cricket, you just got to go through it, and that can be brutal. They should have folded at the start of the Ashes, really, but they had to go through it, and it was brutal. What you're seeing in this series is, I'm afraid, 2 quite modest sides battle it out in sub-standard conditions. It's terribly frustrating and annoying that the game has come to this in a way.
Of course, the other way that you can win a hand in poker is to bluff, and maybe England have just been bluffing really badly for quite a long time.
You could argue that. I quite like that, the extension of it that way, because England obviously have utilised home advantage in the last few years, which is fine, nothing wrong with it. But you have to accept that it doesn't necessarily show how good you are in all conditions. India utilised home advantage as much as any team's ever used home advantage in beating England in India. I've got no issue with that. But, if England do it too, I've got no issue with that either. But what it doesn't necessarily tell you is who's the best side in the world in all conditions. And, it'd be very hard to argue after the last year that England are anything other than at best a modest test side.
Our last question comes from Danny this evening, and Danny's asking, who saw this coming when West Indies were 95 for 6? And I think Danny might be having a bit of fun.
Well, I mean, and I didn't particularly, because I still thought at that stage England might get a first innings lead. I thought they might get a lead of 50 off. But, one of the great things about cricket, one of the reasons I love it, and this game in particular has been so intriguing, is that, the unexpected happens all the time. So, it was always possible because we saw what happened in England's first innings. One of the things, go back to an earlier question about tail enders. I think I may have mentioned this yesterday, but very often tail enders play within their limitations. And certainly De Silva did that. Not that he's a tail ender, and Roach does that. They don't really chase the ball, and that's part of the thing. Where someone like Dan Lawrence, he does. He has lots of huge range, and sometimes that can get you into trouble, can't it? But I suppose it was always a possibility because we knew when the pitch became easier, when the ball became softer. I suppose is the important thing, that run scoring was easier. But I think, I don't know how many runs this pair have put on, but I thought that England would take a first innings lead, and I thought that would be very significant. So who knows what could yet happen. If they could extend this beyond 50 or so on the third day, then are England under a bit of pressure starting their third innings? Well, they probably are. But equally, maybe 150 would be enough to win it.
This partnership's 55. I think looking back through it, there's now been 13 cases of an 8th, 9th or 10th wicket partnership against England of more than 40 since the pandemic started. So in the last 2 years, I don't know whether that is, I don't have any extra data to compare it against anywhere else, but it does feel like a reasonable number of partnerships towards the bottom end that are causing England a bit of problem, which I guess goes back to the point made earlier about tail enders and how to get them out.
Well, I think there's a lot, isn't there? I mean, you'd also have to say that tail end batting has almost disappeared in recent years, and that batters do, the sides do bat down. Roach is coming in at 10. I mean, I've seen it bat at 8. So there is a bit of scope for that to happen more often than used to happen when you had people like Alan Mullally and Devon Malcolm in the tail. But the game has changed. They're expected to be better and do more. And equally, England's skills are very often about using the new ball. They certainly have been with Jimmy Anderson. And so when all the shine goes off that, these things are probably going to happen. But again and again, it will come down to the point that really, if we're honest, England are in a weak era in terms of Test cricket. I thought they had an opportunity a few years ago to be a very good side. It didn't really happen. And now they have a side again in transition, and with 2 fantastic players in Root and Stokes, and quite a few who are trying to, Broad and Anderson, would appear to be at the tail end of their career, and others trying to make their way. And I think we mustn't accept that these things are cyclical. Clearly, there's always an element of that, but I don't think you can trust to luck when you invest all this money and you have all these systems in place. And, I think at the end of my piece today, I've said that, people will say that Chris Woakes has been exposed, and he probably has, as much as I regret to say it, certainly at this stage of his career. But I still think he's probably just about the best option of the fit bowlers available to England once you exclude Anderson and Broad. And the fact is, we don't have very many people who are really good enough to take wickets in overseas conditions. Do we? I mean, actually, if people have ideas, let me have them. But I just think it's a bit naive to sort of pluck names from county cricket and say, George Garton would have changed everything. Do you know what I mean? Good though these cricketers are. Good, excellent though someone like Chris Rushworth is. Excellent cricketer. Definitely wouldn't let England down. But I watched, as I'm sure you did, a bit of Pat Cummins bowling in Pakistan recently. And he finds a bloody way, doesn't he? He finds a way. And he finds a way by bowling quick, with good skills, and consistently. Well, do England have anyone quick, consistent, that skillful? Right now,
no. But in another lifetime, maybe they would have had a Wood, a Stokes, and an Archer combination going on at the same time.
Australia have had people that have been injured. They've had people who've had to retire to injury. They're able to leave out Hazelwood. Imagine that. I don't know. I don't think, all the caveats you're suggesting, they're all absolutely reasonable. Of course they are. But I think that if we're honest, they're not enough to suggest that actually England keep being unlucky. You can't keep saying they're unlucky. 16 tests, 5 series. They can still win this one, of course.